Welcome to The Stacks, a podcast about books and the people who read them. I'm your host, Tracy Thomas, and today I am thrilled to welcome Jason De León to the show. Jason is an anthropologist and professor at UCLA, best known for his work documenting the experiences of migrants crossing the U.S.-Mexico border. His new book, Soldiers and Kings: Survival and Hope in the World of Human Smuggling, is a finalist for the National Book Award. It offers an in-depth look at human smuggling, focusing on the people involved in this dangerous underground network and the resilience and survival strategies they employ. Today, Jason and I talk about the difference between trafficking and smuggling, why he wanted to write a book that focuses on smugglers, and how this book has impacted him mentally and emotionally. Don't forget, our book club pick for October is The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. We will be discussing the book on Wednesday, October 30th with Franklin Leonard. Everything we talk about on today's episode of The Stacks can be found in the link in the show notes. And if you love this show and you want inside access to it, or just to show us a little support, you can go to patreon.com/thestacks and join the Stacks Pack. For just $5 a month, you get to be part of our amazing Discord community. You get to come to our monthly virtual book club meetups. You get a bonus episode each month, and you get to know that that money is going to help make this podcast possible. Another fun perk is that you get a shout out on the podcast. So thank you to Claire E., Alexis Bogardus, Kelly Kane, Anna H., and Karen Kavanaugh. I also have a newsletter that you can subscribe to at tracythomas.substack.com, where you will still get those bonus episodes, hot takes on books and pop culture, and so much more. That also goes to supporting the show and keeping you up to date with whatever I am up to. So again, go to tracythomas.substack.com and subscribe. All right. Now it is time for my conversation with Jason De León. All right, everybody, I am so excited. I am joined today by National Book Award long-listed author Jason De León, whose book is called Soldiers and Kings: Survival and Hope in the World of Human Smuggling. Jason, welcome to The Stacks.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Was that an exciting day or what?
It's pretty unreal. I mean, this is a book about people who aren't supposed to have a voice and who, kind of live on the margins of everything. And for it to be recognized as an important story has just been really, I'm more excited for those guys, I think than I am even for me, but a complete shock.
I love it. Very exciting. I guess we should actually start with what's the book about. So in about 30 seconds, will you tell folks about Soldiers and Kings?
Yeah, Soldiers and Kings is a long-term study of what it's like to be a human smuggler moving migrants across the length of Mexico. I had been studying migration for a long time, but usually from the perspective of migrants themselves, and just knowing that there's this important component of the story that just hadn't really been told. And so I spent about 7 years with Honduran smugglers who were moving their fellow country people from Honduras across Mexico into the United States.
Okay. I have so many questions for you. I started the book after the long list was announced. And after about, 50 pages, I immediately reached out to your team and I was like, I have to talk to this person. It's one of those books that brings up so much in the content of the book. But for me, as a person who reads a lot of investigative journalism, I had a lot of questions about sort of like the ethics and the procedures behind ethnography and the anthropology aspect of what you do. On a really basic level, can you kind of share, which you do share in the beginning of the book, but can you share with listeners, what is sort of the difference between journalism and anthropology or ethnography, as techniques?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an important question because there are definitely journalists who do ethnographic sorts of things, and there's quite a bit of overlap. I think for me, the major difference between ethnography and journalism, one of the major differences is just time. You could think about ethnography as like the most extreme form of slow journalism, where the projects take years, sometimes decades to work on, and it's spending so much time in the field with people, doing interviews, observing, taking notes, and that just goes on for a very, very long time. And so we don't really have a deadline, right? So there's no that's why these things can take a while. I think the other thing about ethnography that differentiates it from some forms of journalism is that we also spend a lot of time being concerned about what it is we're actually doing. I mean, with journalism, it's like, okay, you've got to be there. You're chasing a story, and the goal is to meet a deadline and to get the story out in the world. Ethnographers, it's more like, okay, it's thinking about the process itself. Why am I here? Why am I doing this? What are the implications of the work that I'm doing? What could happen in the long run if I publish these things, if I write about these kinds of things? And I think I say in the book, we're sort of I think of us as like the Larry David of social science. And it's like, it's constantly overthinking and saying out loud all of our worries and concerns, which I think keeps the discipline a bit grounded.
Yeah. I mean, I think a thing that I noticed also is that you are really a part of this story. And I don't know if that's common in ethnography or if that's just this book that you've written in this story, but I guess what is the goal with an ethnography? Why write that instead of, spending time and doing a reported piece?
Yeah, I mean,
I know that's sort of a big question because you sort of dedicated your life to this work. So
I mean, I think when I think about ethnography, or why do I do it, partly is because I'm just so fascinated by the world. Like people I find to be, I'm the last person to leave a party. I'm the person who will have a prolonged conversation with a stranger about all kinds of stuff. And for whatever reason, people like telling me all kinds of stuff about their lives. And I think part of it maybe is because I'm so deeply interested. Like I'm really like, oh man, like how cool is that? I think everybody has an interesting story. And so I'm drawn to ethnography partly because of that. But the goal is often I think the goal of anthropology, which is what ethnography sort of falls on, it's a major primary tool that we use within the discipline. The goal is to get us to think about the world in a different kind of way, and perhaps in a non-expected way. One of the anthropology taglines is it's making the familiar strange and the strange familiar. And so with ethnography, it's, you think you already know the story, but have you thought about it from this perspective? And, for me, that's what I love about it is that, anthropologists bring this weirdness to the table that you oftentimes don't see in journalism or in other, social science kinds of approaches. I mean, we're the weirdos who look at the world in a strange way and try to tell a different kind of story, I think.
I feel so, I see a kindred spirit in the sort of curiosity and interestedness that you're talking about, because I think I have a lot of that. I mean, I interview people for 350 episodes about their books and like all these little silly, tiny questions that I'm just so fascinated by the process. Let's talk about this book. It's about, like, as you mentioned, smugglers. And I guess I'd never really thought about it, but can you tell people sort of the difference between a smuggler and a trafficker? Because I think those words are used interchangeably a lot in popular conversation, but they're very different things.
100%. I mean, we're hearing it a lot right now because of the election, and people want to talk about border security. And people will say, our goal is to stop trafficking at the U.S.-Mexico border. What they really mean is migration. And I think that there's a reason the general public doesn't understand the difference, because we conflate those terms all the time. And so it's real simple. I mean, people are trafficked against their will. People are smuggled typically because they want to be. And so a smuggler is someone who you could think about provides a service to a client. I need to get to this place. I'm going to pay you money, and you are going to get me to that place at the end of the day. A trafficker says, I'm taking you now. You have no longer any control over your destiny, and I'm going to sell you into slavery or whatever else. I'm going to move you against your will.
Right.
That's not to say that you can't hire a smuggler who you think is going to provide a service for you, and they can't, betray you and then start to traffic you. I mean, that does happen. But at the end of the day, they're two very distinct things. And, smugglers, we could think about them as, they are the service providers in the realm of undocumented migration. I mean, people are rating them, they're recommending them, they're writing them bad reviews. I mean, and they're literally writing reviews of them on like Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. So it's out there. I mean, it's a service that people are actively seeking out and paying for. But it's totally demonized because, you only really hear about smugglers when somebody dies. People get left in the back of a truck and they die. They walk through the desert and they're abandoned by their smuggler and they die. And the government loves to bring those points up and to say, thousands of migrants have died in the Arizona desert because smugglers have abandoned them there or have brought them to the desert. But people cross through the Sonora Desert of Arizona because of border policies that purposefully funnel them there. And it got to the point where people said, well, the only way I'm going to get across this desert is if I find a smuggler to bring me through this journey. But so we have to think about them if they were all bad people, if they only did bad things to folks, it would cease to exist as a business. But the fact that there are just enough of those smugglers who come through at the end of the day on the agreement, that the system keeps functioning. But obviously, smugglers run the spectrum from really good ones to really bad ones and everything in between. And so a big part of this book is just about the grayness of this and how it's this huge economy. People rely on it every day around the globe. And yet we don't really understand what it is to be a smuggler, what it looks like on a daily basis.
Yeah. I mean, one of the choices you make in this book, again, you talk about this, you sort of lay out everything in the introduction. It's a very, very good introduction, A+.
Oh, thanks.
But you sort of talk about how, you're not really focused on the stories of the people being smuggled. And this is really a book about the smugglers. And I'm wondering, was that a difficult decision? Was there ever a point where you thought, I'm going to try to tell both sides of this experience? When did you know it was just going to be about the smugglers? And also, what do we lose from doing that? And what do we gain from doing that?
When I finished my first book, The Land of Open Graves, which really is about migrants who are crossing the U.S.-Mexico border. It's about people who die in the desert. It's about families of the missing who go looking for their lost loved ones. When that book was done, I didn't want to think about migration at all, ever again. I mean, my goal was to shift gears completely. I wanted to do a new project on something totally unrelated to migration.
On what?
At that point, I'm always thinking about things that are going to make me uncomfortable or things that are going to really challenge me. And so at that point, I was going to do a whole thing on cops. And I was like going to commit 5 to 7 years of just being with homicide detectives. And I'd gone to Mexico. I had taken a group of students and they wanted to, interview folks. And so I took them to a migrant shelter, was kind of getting them set up. And I said, well, I have no interest in being in the shelter anymore. I'd been in migrant shelters for many years. I didn't want to interview migrants anymore because I just felt like I couldn't tell a new kind of story at that point. Mm-hmm. And these nuns who ran the shelter, they were like, whatever you do, don't go outside. There's really bad people on the train tracks. And so, of course, me being like, oh, yeah.
Where are the train tracks? Which way?
So I go out there and immediately run into all these, young guys who were involved in smuggling. And they were just like, wanted to talk. They, I found them to be really fascinating. And the fact that they wanted me to, they were like, kept saying to me, nobody ever asked us about our side of the story. And I said, well, I'm totally curious and let's start chatting. And so early on when that happened, I became fully committed to that story. And I knew that it would make people uncomfortable. It made me uncomfortable leaving out, the migrant voices as much as I did. But I just felt like I wanted people to understand it to be its own thing. I mean, and there's a million books about migrants, and it's pretty easy to write a sympathetic book about migrants. I think most people, or a lot of people, not everybody, feel empathy for those folks. Right. And I knew that it would just be way more challenging to write about this group and focus on them. I wanted to do that both because I think that's an important story to tell, but I also wanted to get out of my own comfort zone. And I'm constantly worried that I'm going to get stale. And so it's like, okay, let's do some whole new thing, get uncomfortable, and hopefully that will generate, new ideas and a new excitement around the topic. But it's also, this anthropological thing of, I wanted to tell a story. What happens if you tell a story about migration from this unexpected perspective? Right. And that was the goal. And I think that's kind of the goal with most things that I do these days.
I mean, I think you did such a good job with that because I have read many books about migrant experiences and stories, both reported journalism and memoir and sort of that whole world. And then also, I've even read some books from Border Patrol people. Really not fun. Not great. Not interested. Well, there was that one book that came out a few years ago where it was like, I became a Border Patrol agent. And I was like, oh, this will be interesting. And then I was like, oh, I hate it here. And then I was like, I'm never doing this again. But your book really challenged me in a few different ways. One of which is that it really changed how I was thinking about the power dynamics in this situation. I think, we're often told that the people who are migrating are powerless and they are escaping horrible things, which is true from my understanding, but that the people who are doing the smuggling are these really powerful people and that they have all of this money and access and all this stuff. And I think what you show in this book is that for the most part, at least the people you're talking to, they're equally fleeing horrible situations. They're equally pretty powerless. They might have, slightly more power than the person they're smuggling in those moments. But, I thought that was really interesting. And so I'm wondering, were you surprised by that? Like, did you go into this book sort of having a sense about what it was like to be a smuggler, or like having a sense of how the power dynamics worked? Or were you really sort of figuring it out as you were going? I know you spent time talking to migrants, so you obviously were probably more familiar with smuggling than like a regular person, but how was the power stuff for you?
I expected it to be more organized, and I was expecting like these folks to have a lot more control over stuff. And that really was a surprising thing for me. I mean, even the title, so Soldiers and Kings, soldiers is a reference to like these foot soldier guys who were moving along the train tracks, and king is because, number one, a lot of the guys I work with would refer to themselves and each other as king in Spanish, mi rey. And a lot of those kind of mid-level smugglers try to give off this impression that they are in fact the king. This is their their domain, and yet it's completely fragile. I mean, it's a house of cards, and they can be high and on top of the world one day, and then immediately the next day at the very bottom, starting over again. And that shocked me because partly, the mid-level smugglers that I was working with, they're always trying to give off the impression that they are the biggest, baddest, strongest, smartest person in the room, and the people who have the whole thing figured out. And this is why with ethnography, it's interesting because you stick around long enough, you see that's not true.
Right.
But just to see some of these guys go from having multiple apartments to then sleeping on a concrete floor within less than a year, was quite shocking.
Yeah. You, as I mentioned, our character in this book, you come up a lot. And one of the things that comes up is money in this book. You spend money on the people that you're following and covering, which is very different from journalism, I would say. I think that was like one of the things that kind of popped out. And I have had journalists on the show who have done sort of similar ethnographies. Andrea Elliott, who wrote Invisible Child, where she followed a family in New York City for 12 years or something. And, she would help them a little bit with food, or, she would take them out to lunch to interview them, but she would never like give them groceries. Right. And she had this very clear idea in her head of what was allowed and what wasn't. And I'm wondering what the ethics, kind of air quotes, of ethnography are. Are there any? How do you balance how far you're willing to go, how much you're willing to spend, how involved you're willing to be in the story? And at what point do you sort of cut yourself off?
That's a great question. And it's something that I think we all struggle with. I will say one of the things that I tried to do in this book was to be really honest about those things, because I could have left all of those details out.
Yeah, it's in there. Yeah. I mean, that's what made me think of the question. It was what is happening?
I do think a lot of people leave that stuff out. They just, because they worry that that's going to like undermine the story in some way, shape, or form. And for me, those things keep me up at night. And so I want to take from taking ownership of them and putting them out into the world is a way for me to say, these things happened. This is how I dealt with it. And I'm open to talking about it, and to being like, this is like therapy for me in a lot of ways. The writing is like putting all the stuff out there so that, I try not to hide anything from the reader. Within anthropology, there's long history of this reciprocal relationship. I mean, and I think in a lot of ways too, I don't think about it like I'm paying someone for the story, which I think is the worry in journalism is like, if you pay someone money, then you're paying, they're telling you what you want to hear because you're paying them this kind of story. But with ethnography, I mean, you're there for so long and you're asking the same question over and over again. You're seeing the same, the story get richer and richer and the details kind of come out. And so I was never worried, like if I give someone money today or put, it was mostly like phone credit on their phone, buying them food. I'm taking up so much of their time. I mean, ethnography is a completely extractive process, one with deep colonial roots, and is a really uncomfortable, and I'm extracting information from folks. I'm going to go write this book. I'm going to sell books. I'm going to give talks and be paid for those talks. And so for me, and for most, I think anthropologists, we all we have to come up with our own idea about how does one reciprocate those that we work with. A lot of times it happens. It's not just, I bought this family groceries, or I put credit on my friend's cell phone, we become godparents to people that we write about. We create these really intense, familial kinds of connections that require oftentimes a monetary investment. And so for me, it was, every person is different. And
Right.
when I was writing about migrants never asked me for money. I mean, pretty rarely. And there were folks that, I have a friend who I wrote about my first book. I'm basically his health insurance now. I mean, it's 15 years later, and I'm totally fine with that. I mean, it's that we connected in a way that we're linked now for life. But he doesn't ask me for that stuff. I mean, I have to call and like kind of probe about how are things going? Are you going to the doctor? Can you afford it? Okay, let me figure out how I can help you. With smugglers, it's a whole different ballgame. I mean, these are folks who their entire job is about extracting money from strangers. And so that ended up putting me in kind of difficult situations where I was being asked about money a lot more and had to set kind of ground rules and say, I'm happy to pay for your time when you're not working. When you're losing money, you could be out on the streets doing whatever it is that you're doing. And so, I don't want people to think about me as someone who is taking away from their livelihood or they're losing money in this whole process because money for them, I mean, they're living hand to mouth. But everybody was different. And, the story about Kingston in the book who, extracting as much money as he could from me was interesting because at the end of the day too, I think in some ways it helped me to understand what it might feel like to be a family member or of a migrant who he's smuggling and he's constantly calling and asking for money, or being a migrant and just being nickeled and dimed at every corner.
Yeah.
But every anthropologist who goes into the field has to deal with this in some way, shape, or form. And so there's a long discussion about what are the limits of this.
Right. And for you, Jason, I think the question for me is like, there's no such thing as objectivity, obviously. I think we've been sold this bill of goods about like objective, whatever. And I don't believe in that. And I never have. And I think like as a woman of color, like, I think that's pretty clear why. But you and I both have our own moral codes and both have our own sense of like ourselves, our own objectivity when we're being objective, when we're being subjective. And I guess when you're doing this kind of work, I would imagine that those lines get really blurred because you're constantly trying to figure out how am I going to get this information? Like you said, it's very extractive, but also how am I going to make sure that what I'm getting feels like something that I then would be willing to profit off of or like be willing to sell. So I guess I want to get more specific with you is like, how were you thinking about what your limits were? Like, were there times where you felt like this is too far, I shouldn't do this next time? Or like, were there times where you felt like, I don't know. I think some of it is answered in the fact that you do disclose it in the book. I think that part of it lends so much credence to what you've done is like, as a reader, I can hear what's happening. But I'm just wondering, like in those moments, or even as you're putting the book together after the fact, like how were you thinking of your own objectivity and moral obligations?
It's funny. I started really thinking about this after my first book came out because, I had been really used to like a lot of ethnographies, the writer is pretty minimal. I mean, the narrator. The anthropologist, purposely, they're edited out, and it's supposed to be, we're a fly on the wall, and we're looking at people through, a microscope or an aquarium glass, and we're not messing up with what's going on at all. Which when I started doing ethnography, I was like, this is total bullshit. Like, we're fucking up shit all the time. Like, we're never a fly on the wall. You're the weird dude from some other place who's here recording stuff, taking pictures, and so I got really uncomfortable with this idea that we were somehow, like the like the Star Trek objective, like don't ever interfere, I'm like, well, we interfere all the time. This is
all the time.
And so, what I didn't realize though, it was when I finished the first book, I realized that my voice in many parts was very quiet. I wasn't really present. And then there were other moments where it was pretty loud. And the moments that it was the loudest was when I was the most conflicted about what was happening. Like, do I take this picture? Do I write about this? Do I ask this kind of question? And so there's a way for me to like take ownership of the difficulties and these moments where you're pushing up against this thing that you're like, am I going too far, or is this where I'm supposed to be? With Soldiers and Kings, the entire book for me was like, am I supposed to be here? And why am I doing this? What is happening? And, talking with my editor and my agent in the beginning stages, I had kind of written myself out of this whole story. I mean, I was telling it from this other perspective. And what they both said to me was, we need you there as a character, as a narrator, so you can help us understand what's going on. And so we can we can build some trust with you. So we know that, that you're being hopefully thoughtful about this and you're concerned about many of these issues that are arising. And in order for that to happen, I had to like write myself in as this character, and these moments where there were so many ethical quandaries and so many just really difficult moments that I don't think I could have written about them in a either an ethical way or even a credible way without being sort of present. But that was hard. I mean, I didn't necessarily want to be in the book as much as I am, but at the end of the day, it felt like I needed to be for because there were a lot of things too that I had to work out during this project. I mean, this work fundamentally changed me. I mean, it like broke me in half when my friend Roberto dies, and then these guys and the work kind of glued me back together and taught me so much about empathy and about hope and about the difficult lives that people live in. And so, I didn't expect to learn about empathy from a bunch of like roughnecks who, but these guys really changed me a lot. And I thought that ended up being kind of an important part of the story too, because what does that mean for us to spend all this time in these difficult places and to try to find some beauty and some hope? I think that for me, that was one of the big messages too, is that we can't write these people off. We can't, we can't just think we know what's going on. I mean, there's so much there, and people are trying to make a go of it. And it's important to see that the richness of the lives that those folks are living in. For me, it was deeply impactful.
Yeah. I mean, as a reader, I think that you really do convey that to, I could feel it. I can't speak for every other reader, but I certainly could feel it. And as I said, like, it was a challenging book to read because I think I was grappling with some of the same questions that maybe you were grappling with, that you presented like from your perspective, sort of like, how do you see these people? And I kept thinking like, am I too locked into this like right, wrong binary? I feel like I am. Like, I feel like I kept and I'm like, is Jason an accomplice? Like, and then I'm like, does it matter? Like, why do I care? Does Jason care? But like, to be thinking about the people in your book, and thinking about what they're going through, but also to be thinking about how I have been taught to think about them was really, really interesting. And by the end of the book, I think I went on that same journey with you of like, these are fucking people. Like, what are we doing here? And I guess I was going to save this for after the break, but I'm going to ask this to you now, and then we'll go to break, which is, do you think of this text as being maybe an abolitionist text at all? Were you trying to bring a moral ambiguity to the work?
I have not been asked that question before.
Yes,
but I do think in a lot of ways it comes out like that. I mean, and it wasn't necessarily my intention. It was just, that's what I went in to look at this thing. It troubled me. It was complicated. It made me feel weird in all kinds of different ways. And I was just kind of being, what I thought I knew, I didn't know. And, the gray zone, just like the whole thing is a gray zone. And, I started this whole thing, like my friend Roberto had died. It crushed me. And so then I thought to myself, I just want to write a story about him so that he can be remembered, and, beyond the small number of people who knew him and people who had written him off. And, it was a very sad kind of thing to think about. It's like, he's one of millions like that, and there's so much suffering in the world, and these systems stay in place and stay functioning because I think we've been taught to think about them in these kind of black and white sort of terms. And even I think liberal educated people still struggle with some of these things. I mean, like, I think I talk about it in the book. There's a moment where I gave a talk around some of this stuff, and one of my colleagues said, I didn't like that talk because it made me feel uncomfortable. It made me start to feel sorry for these people that I don't want to feel sorry for. And, my response is that, like, the world is a terrible place, and it's okay to have complicated feelings about these things, because, I mean, we have complicated feelings about a lot of stuff, but we seem to want to put some of these political things in these boxes that they don't really want to fit in, that, or when you get up close to them, they defy these kind of these boundaries.
Yeah. Okay, I have a question about this, but we're going to take a quick break and be right back. Valentine's Day is upon us, and I've got love on the brain. Love for books, duh, of course. Hello. Did you forget what podcast you're listening to? I love bringing you all great reads, exclusive author interviews, and behind the scenes book gossip. But I can only do that with your support over on Patreon and Substack. Our Stacks Patreon community, also known as the Stacks Pack, is where you can go for book club meetups, a private, very active Discord, and a year-long mega reading challenge to help you achieve all your reading goals. Plus, you also get that monthly bonus episode. Now, over on the Substack, you can subscribe to my newsletter, Unstacked, where I keep the book conversations going. I also give you a healthy dose of sports and pop culture, definitely some hot takes happening over there. And again, that bonus episode. If you don't have a few dollars to spare, don't worry. There are free options on the Substack and the Patreon to get you a little extra Stacks magic. Making this podcast is a total team effort, and by supporting my Patreon and my Substack, you allow me to support my amazing team that makes the show possible every single week. So if you or your friends are looking to meet other book lovers and support this indie podcast, come hang out with me on Patreon, Substack, or both. I would love to have you. And since we're talking about love, you can gift subscriptions to the Patreon and the Substack for that special reader in your life. For the Stacks Pack, head to patreon.com/thestacks. And for the newsletter, head to tracythomas.substack.com. And also, there are links to both in the show notes. Okay, see you in the Stacks. Okay, we're back to what we were talking about sort of what we're allowed to talk about, what we're allowed to feel in these situations. In the conclusion, you talk a bit about sort of people ask you like, what can be done? And you're sort of like, this is not a fun answer. Like, I don't have a thing. But what you do mention is the relationship between security and capitalism and how those things are super integral to smuggling. And I would love to hear you sort of explain that a little more, expound on that a little bit more.
Yeah, it's funny. When I used to get asked about like policy questions and stuff early on, I wanted to give people kind of concrete things like, oh, well, I mean, a guest worker program or, whatever. You
wanted to have like your party platform ready to go.
And then, and I used to look at like a lot of like my more senior colleagues who would just come out and be like, you know what the problem is? The problem is fucking capitalism. And it's like, oh, you're just this like 60s liberal leftist, and I think I was always put off by that because I think it was always this like declarative statement with no kind of context or, to say, oh, the problem is capitalism and let's move on or abolish capitalism. I think that's hard for a lot of people because our society is fundamentally built around that. But I think when you start to look at capitalism and its repercussions, what it does, how it functions, and how it's related to all of these things, climate change, border security, the prison industrial complex, racism, every single it's all connected. Right. I think that that's an unsatisfactory response. But also, as an anthropologist, I like to joke that we think about the stuff in so many different ways at once, which is not conducive for like a political slogan. Right. It would be like, it wouldn't fit on a pamphlet. It would be, unless that pamphlet was 200 pages long. Right.
Unless the pamphlet was a book.
A book, right? And so, with this stuff now, and with both of my books, people had wanted me to like really kind of dig into some policy recommendations. But I think anything you put down there that's so specific becomes immediately dated. But also, I think that we're looking at like, we're putting Band-Aids on this huge thing. And these little tiny recommendations at the end of the day, I feel like they fall pretty flat. Like there's so many things that have to be considered at once. And some of them are bigger and some of them are smaller, but something like capitalism for me, I'm becoming, this thing that I used to mock when I say that, that's the problem. But I want to talk about how it's the problem, but then give you some of the specifics of that from my own perspective and how these things are all related. Because I think, we want to keep like, we talk about border security, but then we don't want to talk about like displacement, political meddling in third world, all these kind of, we want to keep everything kind of separate. And I think,
Right.
If someone comes out and says like, oh, the problem is capitalism, it has to be followed with a diagram that shows you how these things are all connected, and how fixing this one little thing over here has nothing to do with the root causes that are going to keep this thing in perpetual motion.
Right. I mean, I feel seen by you right now. Though I'm not an anthropologist, I am a person who thinks a lot about things because I read so many books about things, right? Like I'm constantly getting new people's perspective and trying to distill it and figure out what do I think and what do I believe. And I too have sort of moved to it's just capitalism's the problem, right? And I guess like the question is, and this is like way probably bigger than either of us, but just something that I think about a lot is like, if there is no little fix, and also just getting rid of capitalism isn't going to happen tomorrow, what are effective things? Like what is a big fix that could fix a thing within the system that we're in, like outside of changing the entire United States mission, you know?
I think for me, it's a kind of multi-prong approach to say, okay, like if we want to deal with like the global migration crisis, we cannot start at borders, right? So we can let's think about what's like, when I say people like, how do we solve the problem at the U.S.-Mexico border? So let's think about two things: why are people leaving, and then why are they coming? And you can deal with it on both ends and completely jump over this. You can remove the border if there was no jobs for people to take in the United States,
right?
Or there was no reason for them to leave in the first place, we wouldn't have this issue. And so for me, it's like giving people to say that we have to look at it from multiple perspectives all at once is a big part of it. But then also making more major substantial changes to the system. When Obama passed the Deferred Action for Child Arrivals, DACA, people were super excited about this thing, right? All these kids who had been brought here when they were young to the United States were going to be able to go to college, were going to be able to work. And that was a great kind of first step. But then we looked at it as like, oh, well, now problem is solved. Right. And it's like, well, that just helps a very small number of people. If we're going to start something big that's going to last beyond that, we need to make some uncomfortable kinds of changes. And I think we're not comfortable with those really major kinds of, we want to do small kind of things.
Yeah.
And and part of the reason too is, the American public does think about immigration as a problem to be solved at the U.S.-Mexico border. They don't think about it, with any other geography in mind, or with oftentimes with a lot of nuance. I mean, this is why you can say something like, "Oh, Haitians are eating cats in Ohio," and people are like, "Oh my God,"
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. I mean, that's so that group, you can't say to them, "Let's get rid of the border wall," and talk about, private industry and, climate change or political corruption, these other places that's been fueled by the U.S. interests. That gets, that's too complicated of a narrative for a lot of people. And same thing with like capitalism. Like it turns them off quickly. And they suddenly like, I knew you were one of those leftist, like irresponsible, whatever, adjectives they want to use.
Right. Do you think about audience? Because I'm thinking about like, who is reading this book? Who are you writing to? Who are you hoping is reading this book?
Audience, definitely not anthropologists. I'm done writing for my people. Because I just don't care. I mean, like I read ethnography. I read good ones that are recommended to me, or ones that are around a subject matter that's of interest to me. But, there's a lot of we're putting out a lot of bad stuff in the world because we're writing for this academic audience. And I just think that we're shooting ourselves in the foot, and it's not doing any good for society. My audience was like people who don't know, I think it was people who don't know anything about this story, about migration, and who are going to pick it up and be like, oh, smuggling, salacious kind of thing. And then and be like, haha, capitalism, climate change, empathy.
Gotcha.
And so, part of it is I want people to read this book that know nothing about this process, and to be able to walk away from it thinking about, oh, did I just read a story about migration and smuggling? Or did I just read a story about a bunch of people who are in difficult situations and who are trying to make it work, who just happen to be smugglers, who just happen to be from Honduras, who just happen to be involved in this global migration crisis? But I also, I want to give the public a different perspective too. I mean, it's really hard to tell stories about the border or about migration, because we're
Yeah.
flooded with them. So many of them, you just change the cover. It's the same story within the book. And so I think that's a real turnoff for a lot of people, because they go, oh, I already know all about that.
I already read it.
Yeah. I read Enrique's Journey, or I read, Devil's Highway. I already know all about this whole process. And so to add anything new to that conversation is difficult. And part of my goal is to then try to tell a different kind of story about this thing we think we already know so much about, to kind of flip the script a bit. But yeah, I think I wrote the book for I wasn't really thinking, it was like, I wanted to tell a readable story.
Yeah.
And I wanted people to get close to these people that I was close to. But I don't know if I was necessarily thinking like, oh, is this I think some of the critiques I'm getting from some anthropologists is like, it's not anthropological enough in terms of like the theoretical kinds of stuff. And I said, well, that's okay, because that's not the goal of this book. That's a different audience. I really just I want people who don't ever think about anthropology to want to read anthropology.
Yeah. Okay. I have 2 follow-up questions. One is, what are some really good ethnographies?
Good
that
ethnographies
that you like, to you, according to you, not necessarily,
anything written by Lawrence Ralph.
Okay.
So he's got a new book out called Cito that's about it's unfortunate about the murder of his stepson.
Oh, I've seen this.
Yeah. So he's got a book about gang life in Chicago.
Okay.
That's really good. His first ethnography. Yeva Husseinite, she has a new book out called Exit Wounds, which I think is really good. And her book Threshold on paramedics at the U.S.-Mexico border is really good. I think Philippe Bourgois' books, Righteous Dope Fiend and In Search of Respect, are both really good. Kind of in Search of Respect was about crack dealing in Harlem in the 80s. And it was kind of the beginning of a new genre, I think, of writing for anthropologists. Angela Garcia, she's got a new book out on drug addiction in Mexico City. That's really good.
Is that the ones that lead among the lost? The way that leads them. Yes.
Yeah, it's a long. Yes. Yeah, but I think that book is. I might
have some of the words wrong, but Among the Lost, I think, is how the title ends. Yes, yes.
I think that's great. There's good stuff out there. I think you just have to kind of dig for it. But it does feel like also we're in a moment where a lot of ethnographers are getting more serious about writing for a general audience, and which is really wonderful to see happen.
I like it. I'm interested in it as a style of writing. My other question is about the cover. One of the things you mentioned is you just changed the cover and then it's the same story kind of inside. And one of the things I've noticed in the last 5 or so years is that almost every single book about migration that has come out has a cream colored cover. And your book is blue with yellow, and it really stands out among those books. I can think of like 5 books off the top of my head that are that same like sort of tan color. I'm wondering if the blue was something that you were interested in at all, if you were thinking about this, or if this is just what the team at Viking kind of brought to you, and how this cover sort of came to be, if you were at all involved.
The first versions, we had been looking at images, and so that photo is taken by my collaborator Michael Wells, because we were involved in we shot a lot of images, and there's a follow-up book on the photography of the project.
Oh, cool.
But initially, like, so I had submitted a bunch of images for consideration for the cover, and and some of them were like people on the train tracks and like groups of people walking, and then we just thought, like, do we need another migration book that just shows a bunch of people walking, right? Like that's like that's like the go-to. And so, that image is a beautiful image. It's actually a woman. People ask if it's they're like, what's this guy's name? And it's the back of a woman's head, who had been in one of these safe houses and was hanging out with my buddy Flacco. But that was like, we wanted something that was, a little, we would hope unexpected. And then Viking came with, they came with the color schemes, and I think we just immediately thought it was wonderful. But there was an early version that was cream tan colored.
Was it?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it is the tan. Every book.
Yeah.
I'm just like, what is this? Like, I'm so curious of like the psychology behind it from the cover designers, because there's clearly a conversation happening currently about books about immigration must be dark white.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything that's not in this book that you wish was or could have been?
I wish there was more humor. I mean, there's a lot of funny moments in the book.
Yeah. The pants.
Yeah. Oh my God. Like
Love
that.
the
Yeah.
pants.
Just, I mean, that guy needs his own, Kingston just needs his own. If our relationship wasn't so difficult, I would,
he would have his own.
Oh
book.
my God. Yeah. People are funny. And with all of the stuff that I've written, people will say things to me like, I didn't expect to like I expected to be sad about this book, but I also didn't expect to have moments where I was like laughing about some of the stuff. And it's like, well, especially with like smugglers, so many of them are so charismatic, so they can tell a good story.
They're salespeople.
Oh my God. And so, I could do a whole book on just like migrate humor on the migrant trail. And it's just, and I think that was one of the things that kept me going back too, was that I enjoyed being with these folks, and we were always laughing and just talking shit, and just, the things that would come out of people's mouths are just like, holy moly, why aren't you doing stand up kind of thing? And so I think that was something that, I wish I had kind of had more space for, but there's a lot going on in the book. And so some things had to get pulled out. I think also, so much has happened since the book came out. And I wish that I had some space to kind of update, some of those folks. I mean, especially like someone like Jesmyn, who, is still really struggling and is in Honduras. And it's just a lot of stuff has happened since the book has come out that I think really reflect, especially things around climate change and, just the general disaster that's happening in Central America right now. So I maybe if they ever do an
paperback,
updated version, I can include some of that stuff.
Yeah. Okay. This is a little bit about your writing process. How do you write? How many hours a day? How often? Music or no? Snacks or beverages in your house? Talk about it.
My dear colleague at University of Michigan, Ruth Bahar, who is a beautiful writer, and actually that's another good ethnography. Anything that Ruth has written is just so amazing. But she's someone who writes every day. She's she has this whole ritual, and I'm someone like I haven't written anything in almost a year. I mean,
wow,
the book came out, and then I was busy doing other stuff. I mean, I'm writing a few things in there. I write in spurts. And so, but when I was working on Soldiers and Kings, I was on sabbatical. And so I was writing every day. I would get up. Usually I'd get up in the morning. I'd go for a run. I'd listen to whatever music I needed to be with for what I was writing about. So if I'm writing about Kingston, there's certain songs there. If I'm writing about Flaco, I've got that music. And so I don't know if that's like my like OCD brain or whatever, but it's like, it'll be the same song, just, Spotify, when it gives me my yearly roundup, they're like, you listen to this song 4 million times.
Like you listened to 6 songs this year.
Yeah. And so, it's sort of like I run, I get the kind of music, in my head, and then I'll sit down. I used to be able to write for a lot longer periods of time, like 8 hours. And now because of kids and everything else, and my brain doesn't work like it used to, it's usually like 8 until lunchtime. And then I'll eat. I try not to look, I don't look at email or anything. And then if I can do a little bit more after lunch, that's great. And then I will just read for the rest of the afternoon. I would say almost 50% of my writing process is reading books. Like I read, and then I go, God, I wish I could write like this person. And then that keeps me gets me excited for the next day.
Okay. So I know that you were reading Jesmyn Ward while you were writing this book because it's in the acknowledgement. But what sort of stuff are you reading? Just reading for pleasure? And also on the Jesmyn Ward front, what about her writing do you feel like you were using? Like what was useful to you about her work?
I think about her work. Well, and this is why there's a character named after her in the book.
Oh, right. Because these are all nicknames.
Yeah.
Or like made up names.
Yeah. With her stuff, I like the kind of the brevity of the writing style, which, right. I sort of think she's and Hemingway kind of does this to me where it's like, I don't understand how someone can break your heart with 6 words. And she's really good at doing that. And, but also really being self-aware, which a lot of Hemingway, I think wasn't often, was just kind of heavy handed. And so I appreciate the fact that she can break your heart with 5 or 6 words, but also, can write in such a sensitive kind of nuanced way and tell the story in a kind of, a gentle, yet really powerful and kind of heartbreaking way. And I love all of her stuff. I mean, including, her memoir, The Men We Reap. Ugh. I think it's like
that's like I think that's her best book. Yeah, nobody wants to talk to me about that.
That was a book that I think I read that maybe second or third after I'd started and was like, oh my God, why isn't she writing more of this?
Isn't it amazing?
And it's beautiful. And, so yeah, I think I'm always trying to just write shorter sentences, but pack in as much as I can in a way that, it doesn't feel heavy, but it is.
Wardian.
Yeah, exactly. But
I like that.
But yeah, the reading part for me, that's like, I tell people, I'm also a musician. I'm like, you can't make an album if you're not listening to music all the time. If you're not hearing, and this is why I think the problem with anthropology and ethnographers, they're reading other ethnographies, trying to write an ethnography, reproducing, some of those bad habits. And part of it is like, I think when you become an academic, graduate school, for me at least, killed my love of reading. Because I was just reading things I didn't, things for work. I was not reading any literature, things that I loved. And when I was writing my first book, I had to go back and rediscover my love of reading, because I hated writing. Prior to my first book as an academic, I hated the writing process. I didn't want to do it. And it wasn't until I was forced to write a book, and then was then forced also to rediscover my love of reading, that I just remembered, like, oh, I used to read so much. And I read mostly fiction. I don't read any it's pretty rare that I read nonfiction these days. But I find that, 4 or 5 hours of writing, 3 hours of reading, rinse, repeat.
Okay. Besides Jesmyn Ward, what else are you loving right now?
I'm rereading a lot of old stuff. I'm teaching this class called Archaeology of the Apocalypse, which is half speculative fiction, and it's getting students to think about what the archaeological remnants of our future disaster could look like. And so I'm teaching Handmaid's Tale. Actually, it lines up.
I just read that for the first time.
Yeah. I'm rereading that, and it's like, I'm loving rereading that. I mean, loving it and also being totally mortified about.
Yeah.
But so I'm reading that right now and really enjoying that. I just read The Fact of a Body. Is that what it's called?
Yeah. By Alex Marzano.
Yeah.
Something.
I really enjoy. I enjoyed that. That was, people recommend nonfiction to me that it's usually something super dark like that. But I just I really. That book really stuck with me for, I'm still thinking about it a month and a half, 2 months later.
I want to give you a recommendation based on the class you're talking about, which is one of your fellow long listed books, which is Magical Realism.
Okay.
I think you'd really appreciate it.
Oh, excellent.
It talks a lot about speculative fiction and fantasy and the genres, and also like how they function due to like colonialism and race. And it's just really smart stuff. Really good. Another thing you mentioned in the acknowledgments is your therapist, and how therapy is sort of a part of your process. And anytime I see that in a book, I almost always want to ask about it, because so many authors kind of act like this stuff doesn't affect them. And I'm wondering, like, what do you feel like? Do you feel like there's parts of this book that you could not have written without therapy?
No, it was more like, this book sent me to therapy, back to therapy.
Okay.
But it was like, as I was writing this stuff out and needing to get it out, going like, oh, that's interesting. Still thinking about that, huh? I thought we had already resolved that. And, cause I had been in therapy as a kid. And then I had this kind of very brutal, childhood living with my dad that just, I'm still working that out now, but I blocked it out in a lot of different ways. And I think it manifests itself later in life in terms of like the kind of maniac that I was for a long time, and all of the struggles that I had with like self-destructive kind of tendencies, working on this book and writing and working with all these young men who I'm seeing myself in them was kind of eye-opening to be like, oh, cause I kept asking myself, like, why do I get along so well with these guys who just feel like they want to die, or who are just like headed towards self-destruction? And then maybe I'm like, oh, it's because this feels super familiar. And so the stuff started to come out, and I was feeling like, one, that I was damaging myself by trying to write about this stuff. I didn't have the language to talk about some of these things. Things were I think resurfacing for me that were really troubling. And it was kind of like, I wrote this book. I put a lot of stuff in there that I had never really said out loud, or at least not publicly. And then was like, oh, now what? Now I don't like writing about it was sort of therapeutic. But once the book was done, I was like, once the book was done, it just felt like, oh, well, I don't have that was my safety net. And so I
Right.
needed to go back to therapy. And I feel like I went back to therapy after more than 20 years, better equipped to talk about this stuff because I had just been telling it to the public, right? I just been writing it out. And now I was like, okay, I'm here to work. I'm here to be open and honest about what's happening. And, my therapist, she sort of came on board. I want to say, I was already in the editing stage, but a complete, it just changed so many things for me. And I just came back from a border conference last week in LA with a bunch of writers and stuff. And the last day we were just all talking about, how much people love being in therapy, and the people who weren't in therapy were like, well, maybe I need to, we're like, yeah, come with us. You'll love it. It's great. It's yeah. I mean, she was, my therapist, Teresa, was so important for me to get through those last sort of hurdles. And then more importantly for me, just to feel like I'm in a good place now, and I'm getting to an even better place as I'm working on doing my self work, which I never thought. I mean, before I started this book or even went back to therapy, I didn't, this idea of like personal growth. I was like, what? Who needs that? Like, I'm fine. I've been, this stuff, this shit. I'm like bulletproof. And my first book was really depressing and hard. And I think people would ask me like, well, how do you do this difficult stuff? You're interviewing people who've lost a child and they're missing. You're finding a dead body in the desert. How does that? How are you getting through that stuff? And I used to say things like, well, that's what beer's for. Or, I would say things like, I have a thick skin because, I have a high tolerance for terribleness because of who I am. And the older I've gotten, I realize that like I'm more sensitive now than I've ever been. And, but I also needed to like be really honest with the reader about, this, and this is why like, I'm not the fly on the wall, I might be in the corner, but I'm in the corner crying. I'm in the corner, like people are looking at me and they're like adjusting their behavior based on that. And then I'm going home and being like, wow, that really fucked me up. But I think it's, part of this book, maybe one audience that's more specific is I wanted to write something for people who were thinking about doing ethnographic work so that they could see how challenging it is and how how we mess up all the time. And that's okay. I mean, the world is messy, and I'd never wanted to hide that because a lot of the ethnographies I'd read early on, it seemed like the writer had everything figured out. Everything was perfect. Right. You show up, people tell you their secrets, and you go home and write about it, and nothing bad ever happens. And that has never been my experience. And so I wanted that to be something up front so that a student could look at it and go, oh, this is going to be challenging, but I can do it. And a way to deal with it is just to be, for me at least, is to be really open about what I'm going through.
Okay. We're like sort of out of time, but I have like 2.5 really quick questions. One is, what's a word you can never spell correctly on the first try?
It's oftentimes words with like EI or IE, like
it's impossible.
Yeah, and AI is making my life. I mean, I'm just like, yeah, is it autocorrects everything?
Yes. I just leave typos now. I'm just like, I know it's wrong, but I can't figure it out. You get the point.
It's fine.
My other little mini half question, it's not really a question, it's more of a statement. You're a Dodgers fan. How dare you? Okay, next.
Yeah.
I'm a Giants fan, and I was reading when I was in the acknowledgments, I was like, what's happening here? Why am I taking strays right now? Like, you're like, to my best friend ever, a Giants fan. I was like, ew, Jason, I liked you, but now I don't.
Yeah. My sister is a big Giants fan, and she gives me so much shit.
She's got good taste.
Yeah. I mean, I was born in San Francisco, but raised in LA.
Okay.
And
I was born in Oakland, raised in Oakland, but my dad is from San Francisco and my godfather is Dusty Baker. So in my childhood, I was raised a Giants fan. Yeah. Now I've become, I'm still a Giants fan, but I rooted for many teams as he's traveled around the league. But I've always hated the Dodgers deeply.
He was a Dodger.
He was a Dodger, but not in my lifetime. He was a Dodger before I was born, so it doesn't count. And I still hate the Dodgers. Yep. You know how it is. You just have to. I have to have an enemy. Last question: if you could have one person, dead or alive, read this book, who would you want it to be?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm always trying to get Jason Isbell to read my stuff so that he'll write a song
Okay.
based on this. And so that's, he's in the beginning of the book. He's on the soundtrack.
Yeah. Okay.
I feel like,
did you send it to him?
I should send him. I gave him a copy of my first book.
Send another.
But I should, because I just feel like, these are characters that he would write about, and probably find some kinship with. But, I think I use these books as like an attempt to like ingratiate myself with him, because I find him to be such and that was the thing too, like not just the reading as a part of the writing process, but also listening to music, especially music with lyrics like Springsteen, Jason Isbell. There's a lot of American, the soundtrack for the book is really, truly was what I was listening to and being kind of inspired by as I was trying to, work through it.
Did you make a Spotify playlist for all of us to listen to?
It is, yeah. So I think the book I think has a QR code, but definitely if you go to the website,
okay,
the Penguin website,
I'll link to it in the show notes.
Yeah, there's definitely a playlist with all of that stuff.
I love this thing that books are doing now, where they're sharing their playlist for the book. I think it's so fun.
I went to them and said, can we do a playlist? Because my buddy Willie Vlaughton, who's a novelist, up in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of his books have had soundtracks that he just composes, like a score.
Oh, cool.
And so I kind of stole that idea from him. But I was like, what if, and I think in my first book I referenced a little bit in the acknowledgement some of the songs, but with this one I was like, let's just give it to you, so you can kind of be in that space with me, because for me sound ends up being so crucial to a big part of the storytelling.
Wow. Okay. This was amazing. Thank you so much, Jason. Everyone, you can get Soldiers and Kings, Survival and Hope in the World of Human Smuggling wherever you get your books. It is out in the world now. I read some from the page. I also listened to Jason's amazing narration of the audiobook, so I can give an A+ stamp of approval to that as well for my audiobook people. The book is on the National Book Award long list. Congratulations. So well deserved. And thank you so much for being a guest today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
And everyone else, we will see you in the stacks. All right, y'all, that does it for us today. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you again to Jason De León for joining the show. I'd also like to thank Rebecca Marchand and Julia Ricard for helping to make this conversation possible. Don't forget, the Stacks Book Club pick for October is The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. We will be discussing that book on Wednesday, October 30th with our guest, Franklin Leonard. If you love this podcast, if you want inside access to it, some bonus perks, go to patreon.com/thestacks and join the Stacks Pack. And be sure to subscribe to my newsletter at tracythomas.substack.com. Also, make sure you're subscribed to this podcast wherever you're listening to podcasts. And if you're listening through Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave us a rating and a review. For more from The Stacks, follow us on social media at The Stacks Pod on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok, and at The Stacks Pod _ on Twitter. And you can check out our website at thestackspodcast.com. Today's episode of The Stacks was edited by Christian Duenas with production assistance from Megan Caballero. Our graphic designer is Robin McCrite, and our theme music is from Tagirajis. The Stacks is created and produced by me, Tracy Thomas.